Good afternoon. I'm Chief Katrina Thompson. I have the privilege of being the commanding chief for the Winston-Salem Police Department. Before we get started, I'd like to recognize our elected officials in the room. Councilmember Scipio, Councilmember Larson,
Thank you.
and Councilmember McIntosh. I would also like to recognize, and I did see him in the back of the room, our city manager, Mr. Lee Garrity, and assistant city manager, Ms. Tasha Logan Ford. I don't think I see any other members of the city manager's office. The reason I called you here today, and the reason for the gathering of community leaders that you see present, is to call upon the members of our community to assist us in solving a string of very violent gun crimes that have occurred in our city, and to call upon those same community members to assist us in preventing these crimes from continuing to occur. I'm going to begin by providing information about 3 recent, very troubling events that occurred in our city. These incidents resulted in numerous injuries and deaths, and investigators with the agency believe that many of the same individuals are involved in each incident. At approximately 1:37 a.m. on the morning of April 7th, 2019, the Winston-Salem Police Department began to receive multiple reports of a shooting in the downtown area. The reporting officers found a crowd of more than 100 people in a chaotic scene in front of Club Nova. As the officers arrived on scene, multiple victims were located and multiple other victims began to arrive at local hospitals. All of them were suffering from gunshot wounds. Detectives were later able to determine that 7 people had been shot during this incident. Approximately 12 spent shell casings were recovered from the scene, and detectives were able to determine that at least 3 firearms were discharged during this incident. In the following days, detectives with the Winston-Salem Police Department were able to recover 2 of the guns used during this crime and eventually charged 1 individual with possession of firearms by a convicted felon. Thanks to the effort of local medical providers, the victims of these incidents all survived and are continuing to recover from their injuries. The second event I want to make you aware of occurred at 7:53 p.m. on the evening of April 13th, 2019. Officers were dispatched to the 2400 block of Ivy Avenue on a reported discharging firearms. Detectives would later learn that a children's birthday party was being held in Bloom Park, where this incident occurred. Detectives would later recover more than 50 spent shell casings and determine that at a minimum of 5 different firearms had been discharged during this incident. In the following days, detectives recovered 2 firearms and are currently seeking 1 suspect on an outstanding warrant for arrest related to this incident. Despite the heavy exchange of gunfire in this incident between 2 groups known to local law enforcement, no injuries were reported to authorities. The third event that I want to discuss occurred at 10:57 p.m. on the evening of May 18th, 2019. Officers were dispatched to the 4200 block of Cody Drive after receiving information that multiple people had been shot at this location. The reporting officers encountered a large, chaotic crowd of more than 100 people. It was later determined that a cookout was being held at a residence on this street when gunfire erupted. Detectives were able to determine that at least 6 people were shot during this incident. 23-year-old Jalen Siobhan Cochran died at the scene, and 26-year-old Fred Douglas Hawkins III succumbed to his injuries less than 72 hours later. 4 firearms were recovered at the scene, and ballistic evidence gathered during the investigation indicated that at least 8 firearms were discharged during this incident. Investigators recovered more than 80 spent shell casings from that crime scene. Detectives have worked virtually round the clock since this incident occurred on Saturday night. In the days that follows, detectives have seized 5 guns and made 1 arrest for possession of firearms by a convicted felon. We believe that the 3 events that I just described took less than 2 minutes to occur. In those 2 minutes, at least 13 people were shot. 2 of these people lost their lives. A minimum of 16 firearms were discharged, and more than 140 shots were fired. The weapons used ranged from semi-automatic pistols to semi-automatic rifles to revolvers. Ballistic evidence recovered at the scenes, combined with other evidence gathered during the follow-up investigations to these events, have led detectives to determine that some of the same individuals were present at and involved in these incidents. Detectives believe these events stem from ongoing dispute between these individuals and a willingness to harm any bystanders present in an effort to harm one another. Despite the expenditure of hundreds of investigative man-hours, detectives have found few witnesses or victims willing to cooperate with these investigations. On the evening of the incident on Cody Drive, detectives are certain that a minimum of 100 people were present. Some estimates put the crowd at closer to 300. During the first 24 hours of the investigation, only 2 people were willing to accompany detectives to the Vivian H. Burke Public Safety Center to give a statement. The Winston-Salem Police Department has dedicated every detective in the Criminal Investigations Division and every member of our Violent Firearms Investigative Team to the successful conclusion of these investigations. Tremendous efforts have been made by our gang unit, our SWAT team, our street crimes unit, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, the U.S. Marshal Service, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. As was stated earlier, hundreds of man-hours have been expended and thousands of dollars in investigative expenses have been incurred. The 2 arrests or pending arrests mentioned do not represent a successful conclusion to this investigation. Social media postings, third-party statements provided to heartbroken family and friends of the victims, and rumors will not stand up in a court of law as evidence in these events. In many instances, these only serve to hinder the investigation and generate false or inaccurate leads. Witnesses, victims, and others have to be willing to come forward and sit down face to face with a detective to honestly provide firsthand eyewitness accounts of what occurred for these crimes to be solved successfully. The agency I command is willing to dedicate every resource we have to solving these investigations, and of equal importance to trying to ensure that these events not continue to occur in Winston-Salem. We will work round the clock and leave no stone unturned, but we cannot do it alone. The community leaders you see here present are here to ask the community to assist in these investigations and to develop a strategy to prevent these crimes from continuing to occur. As you have heard, every effort is underway to solve these crimes, but the community's assistance is vital. I am thankful for the community leaders that you see here today and their willingness to take the time and invest in helping us keep our community safe. At this time, I will first like to ask Forsyth County District Attorney Jim O'Neill to step to the podium.
I'm Jim O'Neill. I'm the Forsyth County District Attorney. I'd like to begin by first thanking Chief Thompson for putting this together today. It's an unusual step, but I think it's a very important step given the events of the last couple of weeks here in our city. This past week, we lost 2 members of the community in what can only be described as senseless violence. When you consider that perhaps 300 people were out there on the street on Saturday night, and 8 were shot, as you heard, and 2 fatally wounded, we're actually fortunate that more weren't hit in a drive-by style shooting. This is obviously totally unacceptable for our community. It's unacceptable that we're burying people needlessly week after week because of beefs going on. The question we pose to the community is, do you want a safe community to live in? Do you want a safe community? If the answer to the question is yes, we all want a safe community to live in, then everybody has to play a part, and everybody has a responsibility. And if you were out there that night and you saw what happened, your responsibility is to come forward and tell the truth about what occurred on Saturday night. It's Friday, we got the weekend coming up. And I want to say just a word about those out there that are contemplating or thinking about retaliation. And I'm going to give you a little scripture from Thessalonians. Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong, but always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else. Don't pay back wrong for wrong, and strive to do what is good for each other and everyone else, which means you don't take the law into your own hands. And what's good for everyone else is if you come forward with the information, pass it on to law enforcement so that my office can work with law enforcement to bring justice to those that have committed these terrible crimes. I ask for peace for this weekend, and I ask for people to have the courage to come forward with the information and share it with detectives. Thank you.
As I've mentioned, we've worked closely with our Forsyth County Sheriff's Department. At this time, I'm going to ask our Forsyth County Sheriff, Bobby F. Kimbrough Jr., to please step forward.
Thank you, Chief. My name is Bobby Kimbrough. I work in the Office of the People, the Sheriff's Office. I lead that office. I want to thank you for putting this together and bringing us all together. As I've been reflecting on what's happening across this city, across this county, I'm saddened. I've been back and forth to the funeral home, meeting with the families, because I feel like I have an obligation to those families. I hear a lot of chatter, I hear a lot of conversation. And I must be transparent about this. It's not something that the police department can solve, the sheriff department, the ATF, all of us that work in law enforcement. It's not an I problem, it's not a black problem, not a white problem. It's a life problem. It's our problem in this community. If we don't come together in this community and band together and bring all of our resources to bear, not just from a law enforcement perspective, but from the clergy, from the business community, we've got to bring all of our efforts together to change this atmosphere that we have entered into, because we are burying young diamonds way too soon. And only we can stop that. So I just want to leave you with one thought, While it may be happening to one family, in the words of Martin, what directly affects one, indirectly affects all of us. And it's clear that it's indirectly affecting all of us because we all gathered here today. That could be my children, your children. And if we don't take this serious, we'll be having another press conference. So I'm asking the community, whether you live in the county, the city, I'm asking you to play your part. Do whatever you can. We've got to stop this and change this. And as Chief Thompson said, you have our full support from the sheriff's office, the people's office. And I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
As I've mentioned, we're using every possible resource that we have available to us. The violence has got to stop. With that, I'm going to ask Jason Walsh from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, please to step forward.
Thank you, Chief. My name is Jason Walsh. I'm the resident agent in charge with ATF, work out of the Greensboro field office. I'd like to first and foremost thank the Chief, thank the Sheriff, thank you, DA, for inviting me here today. Thank you, community members, for being here, council members as well. I'm here as a representative of ATF to state first and foremost that we fully support the Winston-Salem Police Department, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, and this adventure to try to find and bring those responsible for these crimes to justice. We are going to bring every resource from the federal government, to include resources under DOJ, to include ATF, FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshal Service, and Department of Homeland Security, to team up with these members to ensure that we find those responsible for these crimes to justice. Chief Thompson is a visionary. She leads one of the best departments in and around the state of North Carolina. We work with them on a daily basis. We're going to continue to do so. We are going to bring additional resources from around the area and state to also help us in this endeavor and trying to bring those responsible for these crimes to justice. What I want to say last is, if there's any information out there, any of those that have information relating to these crimes and would like to bring it forward, we ask that you reach out not only to the police department, but us as ATF. We are open and willing to speak with you as well. Thank you.
The Winston-Salem Police Department has long since recognized that community partnership is what it takes in order for us to be successful in keeping our community safe. You've heard us say it many times, we cannot arrest our way out of situations, and we can't do this alone. When arrest is necessary, I can assure you it will occur. And in this situation, these that I've described today, it is necessary and it will happen. In the spirit of partnership and working together to keep our community safe, we have reached out to the Ministers' Conference of Winston-Salem and vicinity, and as always, they have been supportive in terms of working with us to try and keep our community safe. I'm going to ask that Pastor Timbila Covington, the president of the Ministers' Conference of Winston-Salem and vicinity, to please step forward. With her is also Bishop Todd Fulton.
Greetings. I am Elder Timbila Covington. As Chief Thompson just mentioned, I am the president of the Ministers' Conference of Winston-Salem and vicinity. We thank you, Chief Thompson, for inviting us to this press conference. First, I would like to begin by offering my condolences to the mothers, to the parents, to the family members of Jalen and Fred, whose deaths have come all too soon because of senseless shootings. It is always a sad day when someone that is close to us dies by gun violence, because these have gone at such a young age, not having had a chance to reach their goals that they had set for themselves, or haven't had the opportunity of being instrumental in our communities and help building up our communities. We need each other, and we need each other to deal with our losses and our lacks. Yet the only way for us to be able to do that is to begin to support one another and to get to know one another intentionally, on purpose, to get to know each other in a friendly manner, because we need each other to handle our losses and our withouts. There is a scripture that says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some of those have a habit of doing, but encouraging one another." And so I want for us to do good deeds for one another. And we want to be able to meet and to figure out how together we can stop these fatal shootings. We want to do what is right for one another. We do not want to console mothers, parents, community members who have lost at the cause of senseless shootings. We want to be able to come together, encourage one another, and celebrate everyone's accomplishments. This is my plea as the president of the Ministers' Conference of Winston-Salem and vicinity. Let us reciprocate kindness to one another by looking out for one another, but also looking after one another, and doing it so candidly. Thank you.
Once again, I'm Bishop Todd Fulton, Social Justice Chair of the Ministers' Conference of Winston-Salem and vicinity. Our hearts are heavy as we stand here today. 2 precious lives gone in our community. It was in 1967, April the 4th, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about the betrayal of silence. He spoke out against the Vietnam War when it wasn't popular, the betrayal of silence. I know the code in our African American community. Snitches get stitches and end up in ditches. You're taught not to betray that code. But I want to give you a different code today. Jalen and Fred, blood cries out from the earth. Please don't betray me with silence. Please don't betray me with silence. The betrayal of silence. Hundreds of people at an event, and not one person coming forward to say that they saw something. Ask yourself, if it was my child, would I want to subscribe to the betrayal of silence? Ask yourself, if it was me, would I want the community to subscribe to the betrayal of silence? Now, I'm well aware of the history of African Americans in law enforcement. It is a bloody history. It is a history that is filled with betrayal and distrust. But we've done great things in this city to work on trust. I'm confident with our chief and our DA and our sheriff, and we are doing trust building assignments every day. I don't expect for you to forget history, but I do expect for you as a community to look forward to a brighter future. If, peradventure, a white officer fired shots in this same location, 2 black folk dead, 5 black folk injured. It will be total pandemonium in our community. It will be chaos. And our Bishop Fulton probably will be leading the way protesting. But I have not received one call from our community about these shootings and about 2 senseless deaths. So I want to challenge you, family. I want to challenge you, community. Don't subscribe to the betrayal of silence. If you saw something, say something. If you're not comfortable with calling the police department or the DA's office or the sheriff's office, call the minister's conference. Call the Winston-Salem Gang Task Force. But for God's sake, please say something and don't subscribe to the betrayal of silence. God bless you.
Again, recognizing the need to have the assistance of everybody on board with helping us to solve these crimes and prevent any other of this magnitude, we called upon and received the answer of yes from Reverend Alvin Carlisle, President of the National Association of Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Reverend Carlisle.
Again, I just want to take a moment to again applaud the efforts of Chief Thompson, also to Sheriff Kimbrough and all those that have come into our city from the ATF for the reallocation of resources to bring to the forefront these who have committed these great atrocities. I just want to echo what has already been said. It is necessary for us as a community to take responsibility for what goes on in our communities. There was a time in America that we took care of one another, that there were community watch programs that were effective, and to making sure we did our part in curtailing crime in our city. Again, I just want to reach out to those that may have been involved, those who may have saw what went on that fateful night, that if you see something, please reach out. Please say something. We stand with you in the community. You're welcome to call the NAACP. We're in the north side of town. We're working in that community often. And we're there. Call our office. We'll be happy to assist you with making sure your information get where it needs to be. And just please, if you saw something, please say something.
In our continued effort to reach out for assistance from our community partners, again, we called upon our Winston-Salem Urban League, and our Winston-Salem president of the Urban League, James Perry, said yes. Mr. Perry.
Good afternoon. My name is James Perry. I serve as CEO of the Winston-Salem Urban League. And first of all, I just want to say thank you to Chief Thompson for her leadership. I'm quite confident that these are issues that can be resolved under her leadership. Second is, I want to shine a light on a program that we have at the Urban League that is only able to be possible with the support of the city of Winston-Salem. It is a summer youth employment program. Back in 1993, when the nation was facing serious crime in cities all over, President Clinton put forth 2 initiatives. One was to significantly fund policing, but the other was to fund summer job opportunities. And what we saw was a dramatic reduction in crime rates across the nation. We saw that kids saw opportunity and said that they would take advantage of that opportunity rather than get in trouble. So we see this summer youth employment program as a great opportunity for us to resolve the issues that we see in our community right now. As Chief Thompson said, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. So one important note is that the deadline for applications for that program ended this Monday, but in consideration of these very issues, we're extending the deadline to next Friday, May 31st. And so we want to encourage families, teenagers all around this community. Look for opportunity rather than trouble. Come to the Urban League and we'll take care of you this summer. We'll make sure that you have a job opportunity, you have some money in your pocket, that you learn something rather than running into trouble. So thank you very much.
Many of us in law enforcement experience the actual incident typically just after it has occurred. We deal with the investigative portion of it. We deal with working through getting the answers that's needed to bring those responsible to justice. Our next community leader actually has a sad but unique perspective on the crimes that occur in Winston-Salem, especially in our African American community. Mr. Cedric Russell is a community leader, but also he and his family are owners of Russell's Funeral Home here in Winston-Salem. Mr. Russell.
Thank you, Chief Thompson. And I want to thank her also for moving this initiative in the proper direction. I want to thank DA O'Neill and Sheriff Kimbrough also for coming and supporting Chief Thompson in this effort. I'm a funeral director, death care professional, however way you want to spin it. But to sit down with families in the conference room arranging services for their children when children are supposed to bury their parents, that is really, really heartbreaking to me. I could take the position that it's profitable, but the general feeling from my colleagues here in the city, around the state and around the country, is that the violence has got to stop. It has to stop. And we have to embrace the fact that law enforcement are our friends. That is so, so very important. Because if we can't trust law enforcement, I mean, who can we trust? I know it's bad apples in every profession, even in ours. There are those that would say, hey, I could care less. Just bring them in the back door and out the front. But that's not the position I take. I feel that my father, who was an alderman and mayor pro tem of the city, he would be leading the charge for this initiative in support of Chief Thompson and all of law enforcement. So let's embrace law enforcement, support them, and all of the ideals that were brought up by the previous speakers. Thank you so very much for your time.
I want to remind all of our viewers and our listeners that information can be shared, can be provided anonymously through the Winston-Salem Police Department's Crime Stoppers. Our Crime Stoppers number is 336-727-2800. It is absolutely anonymous, and we encourage you with information. If you do not want to give your name, you can contact Crime Stoppers and provide the information. We're fortunate enough that our Crime Stoppers board for this type of incident, the Cody Drive incident, have agreed to pay $5,000 to information leading to the arrest of those individuals involved in the Cody Drive incident. Again, Crime Stoppers is 336-727-2800. At this time, we will take limited questions on this matter. I want to remind you that these investigations are still current and active. And so in an effort to protect the integrity of the investigation, we're limited in the information we can provide, but we are willing to answer questions. Yes.
I did want to ask, could these people potentially be facing federal charges, and what additional federal resources could be brought? That was referenced.
So the question was, could the individuals involved be facing federal charges, and what other federal resources that we have available? And the answer is, depending on the background and what we find out in terms of the investigation, the answer to that is yes. those individuals involved could be facing federal charges. And in addition to the resources that we've mentioned, we also have the strong support of our U.S. Attorney's Office in terms of prosecution, in addition to our local Forsyth County Sheriff's Office. I'm sorry, Forsyth County District Attorney's Office. Any other questions?
Yes, how has the relatively new ballistics lab that you guys have been able to speed up the process opposed to having to wait for the state to speed up the process to where you guys are able to get information a lot quicker?
Okay, with that, and the question was, how has our new ballistic labs been able to help us get information quicker? I'm going to call on our experts, Captain Steve Tolley, Commander of the Criminal Investigations Division, and also Lieutenant Greg Dorn, who's the lieutenant over our homicide unit, to step forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Tolley. As Chief Thompson mentioned, I have the privilege of commanding the Criminal Investigations Division, and I'm also the commander over the gun team that you just mentioned, our Violent Firearms Investigation Team. I think the question was, how has the new gun lab that we are operating impacted these particular investigations? I can tell you, although that practice is in the very early stages, it's shown results in these investigations specifically. In the past, for us to have obtained the ballistic evidence that we utilized in this, that would have been a process of weeks, sometimes months, for that information to have been obtained and reported back to us. In these particular investigations, because of our local NIBIN operation, because of our team and work with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, and because of the resources that have been afforded to us by the ATF Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, we are able to test those casings and in many instances have results back in hours. Days almost always, but sometimes in hours. So it has speeded up the information that we have been able to obtain exponentially. It has also allowed us to connect what on the surface might appear to be investigations that are unrelated. The evidence that we're gathering from those resources very quickly is identifying that those crimes are very often related, and as we've mentioned, some of the very same guns and very same offenders are involved in all the incidents.
So you've been able to find, you've been able to find shell casings at these three crimes that the same guns might have been used in all these crimes?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Ballistic evidence to support that, and also other evidence outside of the ballistics too. Yes, sir.
And what have you guys been able to do, or how could this new ballistic lab or even task force, how will that help speed up the process of even maybe finding those guns that are on the streets in the hands of people that should not have them, to get them, I guess, from putting more people in harm's way like what we've seen recently?
Our goal is, one of the things is to develop through our program the ability to any gun that we seize here in Forsyth County, whether it's seized by the Sheriff's Office or the Police Department. Our plan is, as long as that goal is seized as part of a criminal investigation, that gun will be tested. Again, the speed at which we're getting these results is enabling us. It was information that in the past was always very valuable, but it was cumbersome to obtain. In these instances, we can get the gun, identify in hours to days what crimes the gun has been involved in. So it enables us to react to that information very early on, before our suspects have time to either leave town or develop stories that might make it harder for us to bring the investigation to a conclusion. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
That the people that you're searching for are only involved in these three incidents, or any other shootings or crimes in the city or county?
It's possible they have been. We're still doing a lot of the ballistic testing as well. That's what has helped us to confirm these investigations are related. So it's been a great tool. Yes, they're probably involved in other crimes, but we're focused on these three right now, especially the homicide.
And by the way, this is Lieutenant Greg Dorn. Lieutenant Dorn is the supervisor of our Crimes Against Persons and Criminal Investigations Division, better known as Robbery, our Violent Firearms Investigation Team, and the Homicide Unit. Yes, ma'am.
It seems like crime has increased recently. How does this compare to, say, last year, or is this like an epidemic maybe in the city? I see there's shootings like every other day. I feel like we're reporting on them. Do you think that this is the core issue?
Statistically, we are actually, if you look at our homicide rate, statistically, we are down for the year compared to previous years. I think what we're seeing here is because of the new technology we have and because of the speed at which we're getting these results, we're able to focus on these shootings quicker and able to give them more attention. Now, I will tell you the 3 cases that we are speaking about today do represent an uptick, and thankfully that is an unusual circumstance for the city, and I'm thankful for that. I don't want to paint a picture for you that these 3 incidents mean that crime across the board is up. Fortunately, it is not. We wanted to bring these particular investigations to your attention because they are unusual. I've been here 25 years now. I've supervised the Criminal Investigations Division for about 10 of those years. This is one of the most violent strings of crimes that I've seen in my career. And again, that's unusual for this city, and we want to make sure it remains unusual for this city. The amount of shots that are fired in these incidents and the amount of the weapons that are involved in this is concerning to us. So it was certainly an investigation that warranted the public's attention, and it is an investigation that warrants our plea to the community for information to help us hold these folks accountable.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the overall tally of unsolved crimes like this that you have for the city?
If I can get with you later on that, ma'am, unfortunately, I don't have that information with me. I'll be happy to get it to you later, okay? And I apologize, I don't have it with me.
And you were saying you've been doing this for a long time. Has there been an increase in the types of weapons that are being used, such as I know you said semi-automatic pistols, semi-automatic rifles, revolvers? Has there been an uptick in those high-powered weapons being used in crimes such as this?
Understand that?
About the same nationwide as well. I can go back to 2012 where AKs were being used, or 223s. Just there's not an uptick in particularly. Just the number of rounds being fired is unusual and concerning, as he said.
And I would add this as one thing I would encourage gun owners to do, though, particularly if it is a CCW holder that transports a weapon in their vehicle, secure those weapons other than simply leaving them in your vehicle. If one of the things that's concerning is weapons that fall into the wrong hands through auto breakings. Even if you're a firearms owner and you keep the weapons in your home, secure those weapons in your home, not only to keep them inaccessible to minors, but also when you're not home, that someone doesn't break into your home and steal them.
Even with all these advancements in technology in police work and investigation, would witness testimony or lack thereof nullify this technology?
It doesn't nullify it. This technology is a huge piece of the puzzle, but what you just mentioned as the most crucial piece of this puzzle is what you just said. There is nothing in my career thus far, and I don't anticipate in the future that will change, nothing of more importance in a criminal investigation than the cooperation of the victims, the cooperation of witnesses, and clear, concise, truthful witness testimony. I don't think there's anything of any greater credence in a criminal prosecution than that. We have made tremendous strides in the technology we have to assist in these investigations, but that does not supersede the value of eyewitness testimony.
Even scientific evidence?
Even scientific evidence, no sir. That's a crucial piece, but it's not as important as eyewitness, no.
Can you clarify, is this gang related or just coincidental random acts of violence happening?
We're working with our gang unit right now to make that determination, ma'am, and that's one of the avenues we're investigating. Is it gang related? Do we have new gang members or a new gang, or are these groups related via other illicit activity? So that's one of the things we're following up on with our gang unit, and we've not made that determination yet.
You're saying, even with scientific evidence and even all the information that you're able to get on scene, it's a lot of it relies on witnesses' testimonies. How frustrating is it for you guys knowing that you're in contact with the family, you guys are on scene, you probably have a good idea of who may have done this, but until you have somebody who was there that pinpoints them, you're not able to move in a whole lot of situations. How frustrating is that for you guys?
It is frustrating. We are in a city that is fortunate. The amount of resources we have to put into these investigations is considerable. I can tell you, if you were here Monday morning, you would have seen this room at capacity with law enforcement for this most recent homicide investigation. So we expend tremendous resources on that. I can tell you the investigators that participate in those investigations take these crimes personally, and they take tremendous pride in being able to solve these crimes, and they take personally the ability to go to a mother or a father or a loved one and tell them we're going to be able to hold the person that did this accountable. So it's frustrating when we don't succeed in that.
You had mentioned securing the weapons. So do you believe most of the weapons used are stolen from vehicle or home break-ins?
I won't say in this particular incident that they are, and that's the origin of the weapons involved. We're investigating, and there's a possibility some of them we'll find are stolen weapons. But I do know just from my law enforcement experience that unfortunately too often legally possessed stolen weapons, particularly from auto break-ins, end up in the wrong hands. And so I just encourage folks to take gun ownership as a tremendous responsibility too, and to secure them.
I mean, you see several from other incidents, and then you have more, so I didn't know if you've seen an increase in vehicle or home gun thefts after other previous incidents.
I can't say that we have, Lieutenant Dorn.
Nothing out of the ordinary. Again, it's you could probably run auto breaking stats per year, weapons stolen from vehicles per year, that's going to be consistent.
Thank you, Chief Thompson.
Thank you all again for being here. I want to remind you that the Winston-Salem Crime Stoppers will accept information and pay up to $5,000 on information leading to the arrest of those involved in the Cody Drive homicide. Again, that number is 336-727-2800. I also want to remind you that there are two families in our community that instead of preparing for Memorial Day holiday, they're planning to attend funerals. Unacceptable because of gun violence. Finally, I want to take this time to thank all of our community partners, our law enforcement partners who took time out of their day to come and invest in helping us keep our community safe. And I especially want to thank our city officials for their support. And finally, I want to thank the women and men of the Winston-Salem Police Department for putting in the tireless time and effort it takes to get these cases resolved. And we will get them resolved. Thank you all.